Today, we are diving into a communication strategy that honestly feels completely backward. And yet, it might be one of the most powerful tools you ever learn. We're talking about the dark psychology of saying less to get a whole lot more. So let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a negotiation, maybe a tough conversation, and you just kept talking? You're trying so hard to justify your point, you're feeling every bit of silence, and then you get that sinking feeling. You realize you've just talked yourself right out of a position of power. Yeah, there's actually a name for that. It's called the over-explaining trap, and it's sneaky. It feels like you're being persuasive, right? Like you're making your case. But what's really happening is the exact opposite. You are literally weakening your own argument with every single extra word. Okay, so let's really get into this. Let's break down the explaining trap. Because if you can understand why you keep falling for it, that's the first real step to taking back control in these conversations. When you dig down, it usually comes from one of a few places. A lot of the time, we're just looking for approval, or we feel kind of insecure about what we're asking for, or maybe we're just terrified that someone's going to misunderstand us. So what do? We talk more, hoping we can control how they see things. But ironically, we just end up giving all our control away. And here is the core paradox of the whole thing. It's so important. The more you talk, the weaker your point becomes. Think about it. You're just diluting your core message. You're opening up all these new doors for them to object to, and most of all, you're signaling that you're not confident. You almost sound like you're trying to convince yourself just as much as you're trying to convince them. But what if there was a way to completely flip that dynamic? An antidote to this trap? Well, there is, and it's called silent leverage. And trust me, it builds a completely different and way more potent kind of power. Now, don't get this confused with just being quiet or passive. Oh no, silent leverage is a strategy. It's about using silence and short, concise statements on purpose. You do it to project confidence, to get the other person to show their cards, and ultimately, to put yourself firmly in the driver's seat. I mean, just look at the difference here. On one hand, over-explaining just screams neediness. It muddies the water and you basically hand over your power. But silent leverage? It radiates pure confidence. It forces the other person to be clear, and it builds up your authority without you even having to say a word. So we know what it is, but why does it work so well? This is where the psychology gets really, really interesting. It actually taps into some of the most basic triggers in how we interact with each other. The power shift really happens in 3 key moves. First, your silence creates a void, a vacuum in the conversation. Second, it sends a powerful signal of confidence. And third, it's your ultimate shield. It literally stops you from making unforced errors. Let's start with that first one, the vacuum. You know how they say nature abhors a vacuum? Well, so do conversations. When you stop talking, you create this uncomfortable space, and the other person feels this almost primal urge to fill it. And when they do, oh man, that's when they reveal what they're really thinking, what their limits are, or key bits of information they never intended to share. And then there's step 2, the signal you're sending. Think about it. The person who is most comfortable with silence is always the person in control. It makes you look patient, completely unbothered, and totally on top of your emotions. You don't seem desperate for them to agree, which, funnily enough, makes them want to agree with you even more. And finally, there's the defensive genius of it. Every single extra word you say is a potential landmine. It could be a bad justification, an emotional slip-up, whatever. By staying quiet, you're protecting yourself. It's so simple, it's brilliant. You can't say the wrong thing if you say nothing at all. Okay, this all sounds amazing in theory, right? But how do you actually do it? Let's get practical, because this is a tool you can literally start using the second this is over. Just think about these moments. You're negotiating your salary. You state your number, and then you shut up. Someone asks you a really loaded question. You pause. You let the tension build before you answer. You're in an argument, and you feel yourself getting angry. Silence becomes your shield. Or maybe you just want someone to tell you more. Just look at them and wait. It really is that simple. And at the same time, that hard. You state what you want, clearly, concisely, and then you stop talking. You let the silence do all the heavy lifting for you. You have to remember, in a negotiation, the first person to speak after an offer is on the table usually loses. So let's bring this all home. Thinking of this as your new superpower, it's really not an exaggeration. This is a fundamental shift from using words as filler to using silence as a weapon. I love this quote because it just nails it. The silence that you create isn't some empty, awkward space. No, it's a stage that you've just set for the other person to walk onto and tell you everything you need to know. And that's really the big takeaway here. Your silence is not passive. It is an active, strategic invitation. It puts pressure on the other person to clarify, to concede, to reveal their hand. It's how you stop just having a conversation and start gathering intelligence. It's how you get the advantage. So I'll just leave you with this one question. Think about that meeting you have next week, that difficult talk you've been putting off, that next big negotiation. Where are you going to deploy this newfound power? Where will you use your silence first?